And please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story.
I don't usually let guys pick me up, but this one was different. That's how I justified it, at least. He'd been so insistent about it, saying he wanted to be a proper gentleman. I remember standing at the end of my driveway, checking my reflection in my phone screen, telling myself it would be fine. His car rolled up, sleek and way too polished for a guy who claimed to work some boring warehouse job. I slid in, pretending to be calm, but the first thing I noticed was how the locks clicked down the side of the door shut, like it had a mind of its own. At first, I brushed it off. Newer cars do that sometimes, right? He smiled at me, but it didn't feel like it reached his eyes. We started driving, and I was waiting for that familiar left turn that would take us toward the main strip with all the restaurants. Instead, he went right. No hesitation. Just straight down a road that got emptier the further we went. I laughed a little, asked where we were going, but he didn't answer, not even a glance. His face stayed locked forward like he was following some invisible line only he could see. My stomach tightened. The way the road bent, the way the houses started to thin out, it didn't look like the route to anything. I tried again, a little louder, but it was like I wasn't even there. The inside of the car felt strange. Too clean. No trash on the floor, no receipts shoved in the cup holders, no music playing. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of the tires grinding against the asphalt. I shifted in my seat and noticed there weren't even handles on the inside of the doors. Just smooth plastic where the latch should have been. We passed the last gas station, the neon buzzing in the corner of my eye, and I thought about asking him to stop so I could grab a drink. I didn't. My throat felt tight. I checked my phone, pretending to scroll, but I was really watching the little blue dot on the map. It was moving further and further from anything I recognized. The longer I sat there, the more I realized how wrong this was. The way he gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles went pale. The way he leaned forward like he was chasing something. The roads got darker, and the streetlights were spaced so far apart the car felt swallowed between them. My chest buzzed with the kind of panic you don't want to show. I tapped at the lock on my side just to check. Nothing. It stayed down, sealed. I even tried pulling at it with my nails, but it wouldn't budge. My heart pounded so loud I swore he could hear it. We hit a stretch of road that cut straight through trees. Tall ones, their branches crossing overhead like a tunnel. No houses, no signs, just endless black outside the windows. I stared at the dashboard at the clock ticking too slow. Every second dragged. I thought about opening the window, but even that had no buttons. Just blank panels where switches should have been. That's when I knew this car wasn't just new. It had been changed, modified, every option for escape stripped away. My phone slipped in my hand because my palms were sweating so bad. I typed a message under the glow of the screen, but there was no signal. Nothing with that empty, no service mocking me at the top. I dropped in my lap, my fingers shaking, and looked out at the blur of trees whipping past. He finally turned his head, just slightly, and smiled again. It wasn't friendly this time. It was slow, stretched, like he was enjoying the silence. He didn't need to say anything. The way he looked at me, then back at the road, said enough. I pressed myself against the seat, every muscle stiff. The idea of jumping out flashed through my brain, but the doors were sealed and the car was flying down the road too fast. My eyes darted around for something, anything, I could use. The glove compartment, the center console, nothing. It was bare, stripped down like he prepared for this exact moment. The headlights cut across a dirt road, and without warning, he swerved onto it. My body jerked to the side, seatbelt digging into my collarbone. The sound changed from smooth asphalt to gravel crunching underneath. Dust rose behind us, swallowing the last bit of the world I knew. The trees closed in tighter, and the dirt road narrowed. I could feel each bump and rut through the sea. The further we went, the quieter it got. Even the crickets outside seemed to fade. It was just us, the engine, and the sound of my breathing quickening with every turn. We reached a clearing. He slowed down for the first time, rolling to a stop in the middle of nothing. The headlights pointed at a rundown shack, its windows boarded up, the paint peeling in long strips. No other cars. No lights, just that shack and the night pressing down on us. My nails dug into my thighs, trying not to make a sound. My mind spun with every escape plan, but they all ended the same way. Trapped. I thought about screaming, but the woods would eat the sound before anyone heard it. He turned off the engine. The hum that had filled the car stopped, leaving a silence so heavy I could hear my pulse in my ears. The locks didn't click up. The door stayed sealed. He just sat there, staring ahead at the shack, breathing slow and steady like this was exactly where he meant to bring me. I don't remember breathing after that. I don't remember moving. Just the weight of the locked doors around me, the cold grip of the seatbelt across my chest, and a realization that I wasn't on a date at all. I was cargo, and the destination was already waiting. I thought it was kind of cool when she offered to cook for me instead of the usual drinks or overpriced food spot. She made it sound like this chill, low-key thing. Just her place, homemade dinner, more personal than sitting across from each other in some crowded restaurant. I said yes without really thinking twice. The whole day I kept picturing her kitchen, maybe some candles, maybe music playing in the background. The way she texted me about her pasta skills, I was half expecting one of those cozy nights where you eat, laugh, and maybe watch a movie after. Nothing weird about that, right? Her apartment was on the far side of town, the kind of area where the houses all looked the same and the streetlights hummed loud. I parked up, checked my phone, and saw her last message with the address and the smiley face. No warning signs, just a normal date. I walked up to her door, and before I could even knock, it opened. She was standing there, smiling, holding the door like she'd been waiting. She looked the same as her pictures, maybe even better, but she didn't say anything. Just stepped back, nodding for me to come inside. I figured she was nervous. I stepped in, kicked my shoes off, and that's when I noticed the living room wasn't empty. There were 5 other people sitting there. I froze at the doorway because none of them moved. They were arranged around the room like furniture, not talking, not doing anything. Just sitting. 2 on the couch, 1 in a chair near the window, another leaned against the wall, and 1 on the floor cross-legged with their hands on their knees. All of them staring at me the second I walked in. The air felt heavy, like I'd walked into the middle of something I wasn't supposed to see. I waited for someone to say hi, to explain who they were, but no one opened their mouth, not even her. She just shut the door behind me, locked it, and stood there like nothing was strange. I laughed under my breath, pretending it didn't freak me out, but my chest was already tightening. Their eyes didn't leave me. Not one blink. It was like walking into a room full of mannequins that could breathe. The smell hit me next. Not food, not pasta like she promised. Something sour like damp clothes or spoiled fruit. It clung to the back of my throat. I tried not to gag, glancing around for signs of dinner. Pots on the stove, plates on the table, but the kitchen was spotless. Nothing cooking. No steam. No sound of boiling water. The people on the couch shifted slightly, their knees pressing closer together, but still silent. Every move felt calculated, like they'd rehearsed it. She finally walked past me and sat in the empty space beside one of them, still smiling, still not saying a word. I stood in the middle of the room, waiting, my phone heavy in my pocket. I wanted to pull it out, check the time, do anything to break the stare, but I couldn't. It felt like they were all waiting for me to make the first move, like I'd walked into some test I didn't know I signed up for. The guy against the wall tilted his head slowly like a dog hearing a noise. His eyes stayed locked on mine. The woman on the floor scratched her arm once, then stopped, her fingers leaving red marks behind. None of them smiled. Only she did, like this was all normal. Minutes passed. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, each second louder than the last. My palms started sweating. I tried to step back toward the door, thinking maybe I'd joke my way out, say I forgot something in the car, but my heel bumped into a small table by the entryway. The sound of the glass rattling on top echoed through the silence like a gunshot. All 5 heads turned at the same time, sharp and in sync right toward me. My stomach dropped. I don't think I've ever felt my body lock up like that before. The one nearest the window stood up. Slow. No sound of footsteps, just this gliding motion like he didn't weigh anything. He moved closer, stopping only a few feet away, staring down at me with wide, glassy eyes. His mouth opened like he was about to speak, but nothing came out. Just a long, empty stretch of breath. She didn't stop him. She just sat there, her hands folded neatly in her lap, still smiling, eyes flicking between me and the others like she was proud. I thought about bolting, just throwing myself at the door and figuring it out later, but I didn't even know if it would open. The lock had clicked when she shut it, and I didn't see her slip a key anywhere. The silence was unbearable. My ears rang from it. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. Then, out of nowhere, the lights flickered. Not a full blackout, just this quick stutter that made every shadow jump across the walls. When they came back, all 5 of them were standing. Not slowly, not gradual, just standing. Like the second of darkness had been enough time for them all to rise together. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the doorframe. The sour smell was stronger now, like the whole room was breathing it in and exhaling it out. Their faces didn't change. No expressions. No words. Just eyes boring holes through me. I reached for the doorknob. It didn't turn. I yanked harder, twisting until my wrist burned, but it stayed locked tight. My chest heaved, sweat sliding down my spine. When I looked back, they were closer. All of them. Closing the distance without sound, just a few feet away now, circling. She stood up last, her smile finally fading. Not replaced with anger, not with anything. Just empty. Like her face had been wiped clean. That was the last clear thing I remember, their faces closing and the door refusing to open, the feeling of every wall in that apartment leaning closer. I don't know how long I stood there before the dark finally caught up with me. I wasn't even that excited to go out, if I'm honest. I'd had a rough week, too much work, too many late nights, but I told myself it wouldn't hurt to meet someone new. He'd been friendly over text, nothing crazy, just normal enough. We picked a casual spot, not too busy, not too fancy. One of those mid-sized restaurants with booths and a dim yellow glow from the lamps. When I got there, he was already sitting down. That threw me a little because most guys are late. He waved me over like we'd known each other longer than a few days of messaging. I told myself it was just confidence, nothing weird about it, and slid into the seat across from him. The first few minutes were fine. Small talk, food menus, the usual questions. It felt okay. Then, out of nowhere, he dropped her name. My sister's name. Not in a way that made sense either. He just slipped it in casual, like he'd always known it. My chest tightened. I hadn't told him about her. Not even in passing. I tried to keep my face normal, stirring my drink with a straw so he wouldn't notice me freeze. He kept talking, completely unfazed, moving from one topic to another. The next thing out of his mouth was my old job, the one I quit almost 2 years ago. He said the company name like it was just part of a random conversation. I hadn't even mentioned what I do now. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I smiled and nodded like it was fine, but my hands wouldn't stop fidgeting under the table. I couldn't wrap my head around how he knew. Maybe he looked at my LinkedIn or stalked something old online. That was possible, right? Still, the way he said it felt too natural, like he'd been holding it in for later. The food came. I poked at it more than I ate. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and the next thing he said made my stomach flip. My apartment number, not just the building. The actual number. He said it while telling some story about addresses like it was no big deal. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the plate. I stared at him, my heart racing, but he didn't even pause. He just kept going, smiling like we were in on some private joke together. I couldn't even hear half of what he said after that. My ears were buzzing too loud. I replayed every conversation we had online, searching for the moment I might have slipped, maybe posted something in a story that gave it away. But no, I had been careful. I always am. He shouldn't have known any of it. I excused myself, said I needed the bathroom, but really I just needed to breathe. The hallway back there was empty, the walls lined with cheap art prints. I leaned against the sink, gripping the counter, trying to calm down. My reflection looked pale, like I'd been drained out. When I went back to the table, he was staring at me. Not casual this time, just watching, waiting like he'd know I'd need that break. I sat down slowly, my whole body buzzing, and forced a weak smile. He didn't stop. He mentioned my old street name, the one I grew up on, like it belonged in a harmless story about neighborhoods. He mentioned the cafe I sometimes go to after work, even the color of the mug I always use at home. It was like every detail of my life was sitting in his head, waiting to spill out. I nodded along, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Every second at that table stretched forever. The restaurant felt smaller, the walls pressing in, the lights too bright on my skin. My stomach twisted at the thought of finishing the meal, sitting there 1 minute longer while he peeled back more of my life like it was nothing. I thought about leaving, just grabbing my bag and walking out, but the idea of standing up under his eyes made my legs feel weak. So I sat there pretending, waiting for a chance. The check came. He was quick to grab it, quick to insist, quick to wave the server off. His hands didn't shake once. Mine were trembling under the table, pressed flat against my thighs to stop them from showing. As we stood to leave, he mentioned the exact color of my front door. Just dropped it like the rest, smooth and casual, his voice steady. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't even taken a picture of it online. He'd been there. He had to have been. The air outside felt colder, sharper. I walked faster, pretending I was heading for the parking lot, but my chest was tight with panic. I didn't look back. I didn't check if he was following. I just moved, phone clutched in my hand, praying for signal, for noise, for anything but his voice in my head repeating those details. When I finally got into my car, I locked the doors instantly and sat there shaking, staring straight ahead. My stomach hurt from holding it all in. The restaurant lights glowed in the rearview mirror, but I couldn't bring myself to look at the door. I just turned the key, pulled out, and drove. That night, every sound in my apartment made me jump. Every shadow felt heavier, because he'd known too much already, and the scariest part wasn't what he said at dinner. It was wondering what else he hadn't told me yet. The first thing I noticed was the way she moved through the crowd, like the bar was hers and everyone else was furniture. Not confident or flirty, not aggressively in control, just steady, like she practiced this motion 100 times. That should have been the first red flag, the little alarm I'd ignored. Instead, I told myself it was sexy, effortless, a detail that made me more excited than wary. We sat at a small round table at the edge of the dance floor. The wood felt sticky under my palm. A tray of empty glasses sat nearby, swaying. She ordered for us before I had a chance to read the menu. 2 whiskeys. Straight. I don't normally drink whiskey, not that early, but I took the glass because she handed it to me like it was already mine. She lifted hers, a small toast, and her smile is the kind that made you want to toast back without thinking why. The bar was exactly as loud as she'd chosen. Too loud to really hear each other without leaning in the bass like a war drum. It kept people inside the moment, forced them to speak with their mouths close to ears, trading privacy for intensity. She leaned across the table more than necessary, perfume heavy and warm. I found myself answering questions. Books I liked, where I'd traveled, the stupid childhood band I would never admit I loved. She had a response for everything, a better version of my anecdote, a memory that fit too neatly with mine. I felt like I was discovering someone who had a map of me, and I liked that someone had drawn it so carefully. Then a man brushed past our table. He was broad-shouldered, just a random guy in a jacket, but his sleeve caught my glass. It tipped, a little spilled, nothing dramatic. He murmured an apology, reached, and swept up the cup with practiced hands. That should have been it. Instead, he swapped it for another glass from the tray, one that had been waiting there like a prop. He didn't linger. He melted back into the crowd, anonymous. She laughed it off when I blinked at the swap. People are clumsy, she said, touching my arm like she liked the small worry on my face. She leaned closer, talking louder, tapping her nails on the wood. I felt her watch me more than she spoke. Her gaze was a patient thing, like someone observing an experiment that was finally producing data. The whiskey hit. Not fast, not the pleasant warmth you get from a couple of glasses. This was a slow, sticky fog creeping over the edges of my perception. My vision narrowed, letters on the menu softening, the bass turning into a physical presence pressing into my ribs. I blinked hard, trying to clear it as if my eyes were the problem, but my hands felt heavy, as if gravity had learned a new trick just for me. She tilted her head, studying me with the same small, possessive smile. Her voice was a warm blade. I tried to laugh it off as the drink. Maybe I had more than I thought, but the words stuck. My arm trembled when I reached for the glass. The chair scraped, and I stood up clumsily, knees not answering, heart tripping over itself. She took my elbow like she had a right to steady me. The pressure of her hand was too firm for her size, fingers that felt like quick little clamps. She guided me through the crowd, past the bathroom entrance we should have used, toward the back alley door I only noticed because the light was different there, harsh and cold. My voice tried to form a sound, a protest, but it was a small animal noise that the music swallowed. Outside the door, the air hit me like an alarm. Cold and sharp, it made me want to breathe deep and clear my head, but my lungs were tight. The man who'd swapped the drink was already there, leaning against a dumpster, cigarette glowing like a sunbeam in his hand. He stepped forward without a question and took my phone from my pocket when it slid free. I saw the screen flash, one message, then blank. I reached, but the world, traitorous and slow, let my arm fall useless at my side. I slid down against the brick and felt the ground scrape my palms. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and old grease, and the two of them stood over me, as if they were deciding whether I was worth the trouble. Her face was composed. It was flat, expressionless. The city muffled around us, and in that small, cold space, it felt like we were the only people left. "Relax," she said in a casual whisper. Her words should have been an apology. Instead, they were a statement of intent. She laughed softly, too softly, when I made a sound that might have been a plea. He patted my pockets, emptying them with methodical hands, pulling out my wallet, a Metro card, small crumpled things. My ID was gone. My cards were gone. My shoes were gone by the time I rolled on my back. The last thing I saw before the black took the edges of my vision was her smile, calm, satisfied, as she and the man tucked my phone into his jacket and melted back into the block of the crowd like nothing had happened. I came to on cold tile in a hospital waiting room. A security guard's face hovered above me like a moon. "You were found in an alley," he said, as if that explained everything. Somebody phoned it in. My mouth tasted of metal and copper. My head throbbed where it had met concrete in a place that felt like the inside of a drum. The police were patient and clinical. "Did you see their faces again?" they asked. I tried to describe her, the way she moved, the perfume, the laugh that wasn't a laugh. My answer sounded thin, even to my own ears. They wrote it down, checkboxes that offered no comfort. "Drink spiking and robbery," one officer said. "We see it a lot." That line landed like a punch. They asked for details. What did I had to drink? Had anyone else paid attention? To have any friends in the area? And then they took a breath and told me to come down to the station when I was able. My cards had been used. My bank called a pressuring robotic voice to tell me of purchases at a cash machine I didn't recognize. My phone was clean. The backup clouds stored the last two selfies. Me in a blurred bar, then nothing. The Tinder app still sat on a stranger's server I couldn't reach, or profile. The entire constellation of photos and white lies was gone by morning like a stage trick. Weeks later, the memory of the alley was a bruise under my skin. I kept replaying the moment the drink tipped, imagining myself with the other glass, making different choices like a player looping a failed level. I told myself I was lucky. No hospital bed, no missing organs, but luck felt thin compared to the intimacy of the theft. Everything taken in the work of hands and patience. My wallet, my phone, the right to believe that people were who they said they were for the length of a night. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see her weave through a crowd that obeys her. I can hear the soft, practiced laugh. I can feel the phantom weight of her palm on my elbow, holding me like something small and manageable. And every time I hear someone say, with the arrogant trust of youth, "Don't worry, I got this," I wince, not because I'm bitter, though I am, but because terror now lives in the little places where strangers touch you and make you feel known. They can take everything from you in a room full of other people. I don't go to bars much anymore. When I do, I keep my drink in my hand until the glass is empty and my eyes on everyone who moves like they don't belong. The city keeps its dark corners, and the two of them keep practicing. Somewhere out there, they are wearing new faces like clothes, moving through 1,000 different rooms, picking out the ones that will look most natural when they take what they want. The last thing I remember in the alley was her smile. The last thing I would remember for a long time was how ordinary it had been, how carefully ordinary, until it wasn't. He told me to swing by his place first, said we'd grab a drink there before heading out. I didn't think much of it. People do that. Save money, break the ice, whatever. I drove over, pulling up outside this small single-story house on a quiet street. No cars in the driveway but his. No lights on in the windows. He opened the door quick, like he'd been standing right behind it the whole time. He smiled, stepped back, let me in. I took one step inside and froze. The house was empty. Completely empty. No couch, no TV, no shelves, no rug. Just bare walls, bare floors, and this hollow echo with every step. The only things in sight were a single chair in the middle of the living room, a tiny wooden table beside it, and a stack of zip ties sitting right on top. I tried to tell myself maybe he just moved in. Maybe his stuff was in storage, but it didn't look like that. The walls had no marks where pictures would have hung, the carpet was worn like nothing had ever been there, and the air smelled stale, like no one actually lived in it. He closed the door behind me. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. I laughed nervously, asking about the empty place, but he just shrugged, still smiling like it wasn't strange at all. His eyes flicked to the table for half a second, then back to me. I forced myself to walk further in. My footsteps echoed, too sharp, bouncing off the walls. I kept my eyes off the stack of zip ties, but it was impossible not to notice them. They were brand new, bundled tight, the kind you buy in bulk. He gestured to the chair like he expected me to sit down. I didn't. I stayed standing, clutching my bag strap, my throat dry. I mumbled something about how quiet it was in there, trying to keep the mood light, but my stomach was twisting. He walked past me slow, his shoes scraping against the floor. He took one of the ties off the pile, turning it over in his hands, bending it back and forth like he was bored. The plastic snapped into place with that sharp little zip sound, and it made my chest tighten even more. There was no kitchen smell, no food, no drinks waiting like he promised. The fridge I could see from the hall was unplugged, the door propped open with nothing inside but dust. The blinds on the windows were half broken, tilted at odd angles, letting in just enough light to make the place look harsher. I said something about heading out soon, that maybe we should just go to the bar, but he didn't move toward the door. He stood there, the zip tie looped in his hand, eyes steady on me. My pulse hammered. I scanned the room again, desperate for any sign this wasn't what it looked like. No second chair, no signs of unpacking, not even shoes by the door. Just that one chair, the table, and him between me and the way out. I shifted my weight, pretending to look around, but really I was testing how close I was to the door. My bag slipped off my shoulder, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The sound cracked through the silence, and his smile twitched just slightly. I bent down to grab it, moving slow, my eyes flicking up to make sure he wasn't coming closer. My fingers fumbled with the strap, sweaty and clumsy. The zip tie in his hand clicked again as he pulled it tighter, testing it. That noise rattled in my skull. I stood up fast, bag back on my shoulder, and said maybe I'd left something in the car. I laughed too loud, too forced, but I was already inching back. He didn't answer. He just tilted his head, watching me, that same calm smile glued on his face. The lock behind me felt miles away, but I turned and grabbed for it anyway. My hand shook so bad I missed the latch the first time. My stomach dropped as I heard his footsteps coming closer. I yanked the door handle down hard. For one terrifying second, it didn't budge like it was stuck. Then it gave way, swinging open into the cool air outside. I stumbled onto the porch, heart slamming against my ribs, my bag nearly slipping again. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just moved fast down the steps, onto the driveway, fumbling with my car keys like my life depended on it. My chest was tight, my breaths coming in short gasps. The second I got in my car, I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard it took 2 tries to jam the key into the ignition. When the engine finally turned over, I slammed it into gear and pulled away, my tires squealing louder than I meant them to. In the rearview mirror, he stood on the porch, still smiling. The zip tie dangled from his hand, swaying slightly in the breeze. I drove until the streets blurred, until my phone buzzed with a message I didn't open. I couldn't. I didn't need to. Because I already knew it was him. And I already knew he wasn't finished. I should have known something was off when she suggested meeting somewhere quieter. Her profile had been a college of brightness, sunlit selfies at the beach, wine glasses raised in rooftop bars, candid smiles that felt effortless. The kind of photos that made her look untouchable, like she belonged to a world just a little above mine. I figured she'd want a bar, a restaurant, somewhere crowded, where she could shine with a proper audience. But no, she messaged me after we matched, casual, almost teasing. I know a spot, not far from the station. Quieter. That was my first mistake. I didn't question it. When I saw her in person, the strangeness melted. She was stunning. Exactly like her pictures. Same flawless skin, same easy smile. She waved like we'd known each other for years, closed the space between us, and without asking hooked her arm through mine. The move was so smooth it disarmed me completely. My nerves wound tight on the train ride over, loosened instantly. I told myself it was a good sign. Natural chemistry. We walked away from the busy road, past neon shop fronts and clusters of people smoking outside bars. The noise dimmed with each block. The air felt colder, sharper, every footstep louder against the concrete. She kept her pace steady, guiding me, her hair swinging against my arm when she turned a corner. I asked where we were headed, half joking, but she just smiled, squeezed my arm, didn't answer. The streets narrowed. Storefronts shuttered, graffiti scratched across metal gates. The main road was fading behind us, just a glow above the rooftops. I felt the first little prick of unease, like stepping into water that's deeper than it looks. But she seemed so calm, so sure of herself, that I forced the thought down. Another corner, another stretch of dim silence. My chest tightened. Quieter was starting to sound like a warning, not a promise. We turned onto a street with no lamps at all, just black walls, dumpsters sagging under bags of trash, the smell of damp and rot heavy in the air. The only light spilled from a broken window a few buildings back, too far to matter. I opened my mouth to ask again, this time not joking. But before I could, they stepped out. 2 men. One peeled away from the shadows of the alley, the other slid out from behind a dumpster. Big guys, hoodies pulled low over their faces, bodies filling the narrow passage. They didn't hesitate, didn't even look at her. Their eyes locked on me. My stomach fell through the floor. She let go of my arm, stepped back, calm, like this was exactly where she meant to bring me all along. Wallet. Phone. One barked. His voice was low, sharp, practiced. The other one moved in closer, blocking the only way out, fists clenched at his sides. His shoulders seemed wider than the street itself. I froze, my brain tangling. The beautiful girl, the empty street, the silence, the way she stood there, arms crossed, not scared, not surprised, just waiting. My hands shook as I dug into my pocket. I pulled out my phone first. The taller man snatched it, shoved it into his hoodie, and then held his hand out again. The gesture was sharp, almost impatient. My wallet felt heavier than it ever had before. I pulled it out slowly, every motion dragging like maybe I could delay the inevitable by a few seconds. My ID, my cash, my cards, my life condensed into leather. Gone in an instant when he tore it from my grip. They didn't leave, not right away. They stood there, breathing hard, their eyes scanning me like they were debating whether this was enough. The silence was unbearable. My chest pounded, sweat running down my back in cold lines. I tried to keep my eyes down, not make it worse, but the tension stretched thinner with each second. I risked a glance at her. She leaned against the wall like she was waiting for a bus, arms folded, her face tipped just enough that I caught it under the weak spill of light, and she smiled. Not kind, not guilty. A flat, satisfied smile, like she delivered me exactly where I was supposed to be. The shorter one finally jerked his head. A signal. They both stepped back, not rushing, not scared, just walking with the slow confidence of people who own this street. They melted into the darkness, their footsteps fading into silence. For a few seconds I stood frozen, every muscle locked, my fists tight at my sides. The cold bit harder now, sinking through my jacket. My throat burned, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. She pushed herself off the wall, brushed at her sleeve like dusting off lint, and started walking back toward the main road. No words, no glance at me. Like her part in the scene was finished. I followed for a few steps. My legs shook with every movement, my mind buzzing with static. Something in me screamed that if I kept walking with her, if I let her pull me along again, it wouldn't end here. There would be another street, another corner, another trap waiting. So I stopped. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. I turned the other way. I didn't run. Running would have drawn attention, made me stand out. But I walked fast, fists clenched, lungs tight. My head was hot and cold all at once. Every sound behind me twisted into footsteps that weren't there. The faint glow of the main road grew brighter, then stronger, until the crowd swallowed me again. The wave of sound, laughter, cars, music pouring from open doors, slammed into me. Life continuing like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been stripped bare in the dark. I shoved my hands into my empty pockets. The absence of weight was unbearable. My phone, my wallet, everything gone. My skin itched with the memory of her smile, the way she guided me down those streets like I was cargo, not a person. I didn't stop moving until I was home, my locks turned tight, my back pressed against the door. My chest rose and fell too fast, my pulse still stuttering against my ribs. The night replayed in loops in my head, her arm through mine, the steady walk, the silence, the way she didn't say a single word during the robbery. Because she hadn't needed to. The whole walk, the entire setup, everything she did, it already told me exactly who she was. and I followed anyway. I thought I was lucky when he asked me out so quick after we matched. No endless texting, no dragging it out. He picked a restaurant that was busy but not overwhelming, one of those mid-level places with booths and buzzing conversations. When I walked in, he was already there, waving me over with his confident smile that made me relax a little. The first 15 minutes felt fine. We were talking, the food smelled good, the lighting was warm. He was charming in that practiced way, leaning forward, asking questions, making me laugh just enough. I started thinking maybe this wasn't going to be a disaster. Then the doors of the restaurant banged open so hard the whole place turned to look. A woman stormed in, her face red, her eyes locked on our booth like she'd been aiming for it the whole time. Her footsteps were sharp, loud, each one bouncing off the walls. People went quiet as she passed, but she didn't care. Her gaze was fixed on him. Before I could even process, she was at our table, her hand flat on the edge, rattling the glasses. She was screaming at him, words spilling too fast, too raw, like she'd been holding them in until this exact moment. I froze, my fork still in my hand, staring at her, then at him. His face drained of color. He didn't deny knowing her. He didn't even look shocked. He just sat there, rigid, his jaw tight, like he'd been waiting for her to show up. It hit me then. She wasn't some random stranger or an ex running into him. She was his girlfriend, his actual girlfriend, and she knew exactly where he was. The table next to us stopped eating. The servers pretended to clean but kept glancing over. The whole restaurant was listening, but it felt like the three of us were locked in a bubble. Everyone else blurred out. She slammed her phone down on the table, the screen lit with some app, a little dot moving on a map. My stomach dropped when I realized what it was. She'd been tracking him, watching where he went, following his moves. That was how she knew. He reached for the phone, but she snatched it back, holding it tight against her chest, still shouting, her voice cracking with fury. I could barely process half of what she was saying, but I caught enough. How many times, how many dates, how long she'd been following. I sat there, stiff, my eyes darting between them. My face burned with embarrassment, but under it was something colder, sharper, because if she hadn't shown up, I would have had no idea. The way she described it, this wasn't his first time. He had a routine, a system. Meeting girls online, taking them out like nothing was wrong, while she sat at home watching his location dot move across the map. He finally spoke, his voice low, trying to calm her, but she wasn't having it. She grabbed his drink and threw it against the wall, the glass shattering, liquid dripping down the plaster. People gasped, chairs scraped as some customers slid further away. Still, no one stepped in. I pushed back in my seat, my legs ready to move, but something kept me there. Maybe shock. Maybe the weight of the whole scene pressing me down. She leaned closer across the table, her hands gripping the edge so tight her knuckles went pale. She told him she knew about me, knew my name, knew where I lived, because he'd been sloppy. My chest went cold at that. My name. My address. Details he shouldn't have been spraying. I wanted to disappear, sink into the booth, but I couldn't. The room felt too small, too loud, her voice drilling into my ears. He finally stood, his chair screeching against the floor, his face twisted between anger and panic. He reached for her arm, but she shoved him back so hard he stumbled against the table, knocking over the silverware. Gasps rippled across the room. The manager started walking over, nervous but determined, but she snapped at him to stay back, and he did. Everyone did. Because the energy pouring off her wasn't just anger, it was something more. She turned back to me then, her eyes burning holes through me. For a second, I thought she'd lunge across the table. My heart raced, my palms sweaty against the seat. But she didn't. She just stared, her chest heaving, then shifted her gaze back to him, spitting words that were louder, sharper, final. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My legs finally moved, carrying me up out of the booth. I grabbed my bag, my coat, anything I'd brought with me, and slipped past them. She didn't stop me. He didn't either. I pushed through the restaurant, past the frozen faces, through the heavy doors and out into the night. The air hit me like ice, but it felt cleaner than inside. My heart was still racing, my body buzzing, but I kept moving fast, down the sidewalk, not daring to look back. The sounds of the city drowned out behind me. My phone buzzed in my bag, but I didn't check it. I didn't want to know if it was him, or worse, her. When I finally reached the corner, I stopped and leaned against a lamppost, my chest heaving. I stared at the ground, at the concrete smeared with gum and dirt, trying to make sense of what just happened. It wasn't just that he was taken. It wasn't just that she'd caught him. It was the way she'd been tracking him like prey, following every move, ready to pounce the second he stepped out of line. And for all I knew, I wasn't the first girl she cornered. That thought sat heavy in my stomach as I walked away, leaving them to whatever explosion came next. I never went back to that restaurant. Couldn't even look at it when I drove by. Because every time I thought about it, I saw her face again. And the way she stared at me made me feel like the date hadn't been with him at all. It had been with her. I should have known the minute she asked to borrow my phone. It wasn't the sort of thing you normally let someone do on a first date, especially someone that polished, someone who moved like she'd been doing this a long time, but she asked so casually, laughing like it was nothing. "I just want to show you this meme," she said, eyes bright like she was sharing a private joke. I laughed, slid it across the table, and watched her fingers move with that quick, confident economy you notice when someone knows what they're doing. She scrolled fast, thumb flicking, the screen a blur of images and little messages. She held the phone up to show me something, turned it to me for only a second, and slid it back. No awkward moments, no delay, just her smile and the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, like she just saved me from some awkward silence. I didn't think twice. People borrow phones all the time. The rest of dinner blurred into the easy kind of conversation where you feel like you've known someone longer than you have. We talked about dumb movies we loved in secret and the cities we wanted to see, and somewhere between the second course and dessert, I found myself enjoying how effortlessly she redirected every story back into an angle that made her glow. She hugged me when we said goodbye, light and practiced, and promised to text. I walked to my car smiling less certain than before. I had just missed a beat I couldn't place. An hour later, my phone began to behave like it had a fever. Notifications buzzed in an odd, unnerving staccato. Two-factor codes I hadn't requested. Email alerts for password resets I hadn't initiated. App permissions popping up and resolving themselves. The battery warmed under my hand like a small engine. My thumb slid over the screen and the phone lagged, stuttered. The home screen flickered for a second before settling as if something had blinked behind it. I was calm at first. Maybe someone was trying to break into one of my accounts, I thought. I pulled up my email on the laptop and saw dozens of login attempts. Banks were sending alerts. My social media accounts flashed with sessions signed in from strange cities. And then I found the app, a tiny, nondescript icon with a name I didn't recognize, sitting at the bottom of my launcher. I didn't install it. I never would have. And yet there it was, like a germ under a fingernail. I tapped it. The screen went black for a breath and returned. Nothing opened. The icon stayed. I tried to uninstall it. The phone told me it couldn't. App in use, the message read, and the option to remove it was grayed out. My hands were suddenly cold. I scrolled through settings and found, buried under permissions and accessibility, a long list of rights that had been granted automatically. Camera access, microphone access, permission to read notifications, to view and manage SMS, to observe my location. Each line read like a hand reaching into a pocket. She hadn't just borrowed my phone. She'd handed me a vulnerability. Panic feels different in the dark. It tastes like metal and beats with a focus and clarity you don't welcome. I started changing passwords from my laptop, frantically cycling through every account linked to that number and email. I called the bank, dead end menus, and hold music that hummed like a countdown. I emailed support, submitted tickets, toggled two-factor off and on, and every time I refreshed a login page, the new session would appear under active logins. A device from a place I didn't know, sometimes within my city, sometimes someplace else entirely. Then my camera light blinked. A tiny icon I'd never noticed popped up. Camera in use. A cold dread slipped down my spine. I covered the lens with my thumb as if that would stop it. My phone pinged again. A small file had been created and uploaded. My contact list, texts with friends, private photos, started sensing to an account I didn't recognize. I kept thinking about the way she handled the phone, the speed of her thumbs, the practiced little tilt of her wrist, the way she showed me the meme only long enough to create a memory and not a moment to double check. It had not been natural. It had been a performance, every movement deliberate to distract me while a tiny, invisible thing rode into my life. I wanted to call the cops. I did eventually, but the words felt thin. I think someone installed spyware on my phone. There's no urgency you can sell a dispatcher when your evidence is lines of code and strange app names. They told me to come in. They told me to take screenshots. They asked if I knew the woman's name. I did. I gave it. It felt like handing over the one warm thing in a suddenly clinical world. I went to my friend's place and sat there with my phone powered off and the screen a black, accusing mirror. Only later did I realize how exposed I felt, like a house with a window left open. I walked around my apartment checking locks, pulling curtains closed, staring at the little rectangle of glass the way you might stare at an animal that's suddenly become dangerous. The knowledge that someone had been mapping my life for the past hour, for the past night, pressed in. Messages, photos, the recorded locations of places I'd been, private, ordinary things that suddenly seemed like raw material. The practical steps were obvious and slow. Factory reset, new SIAM, new numbers, calling banks in person and proving I was me. All the bureaucracy of undoing someone else's fast, small violence, my time, my energy, my calm, pulled out into a ledger. But the part that no reset could touch was the feeling she left behind, like a faint sticky film over ordinary things. I imagined what she could see if she wanted to watch. The inside of my apartment, the angle from which my bed looked smallest, the way I fumble with keys, private conversations with friends, the exact sequence of my routines. The most intimate details become mundane once someone else owns them. The most private things become data points. It was not the immediate theft that haunted me. She hadn't taken my money or my identity in the usual sense. She'd taken something more invasive and cunning. She'd taken a lid window into me and left it open. 1,000 small exposures, each more humiliating than the last, any one of which could be used like a scalpel. 2 nights later, after I had my phone wiped and my accounts restored with new passwords that felt like fragile paper armor, I received a message from an unknown number. The text contained a single picture, a photo taken from across a street, grainy but unmistakable, my silhouette in the living room that evening, the lamp in the corner on, the laptop open. No message, no sign-off, just the image and the knowing that she had been close enough to take it, and whoever helped her knew how to get that picture into my life. It was the last, small, precise thing that put me over, not the app or the drain on my accounts, but the certainty that someone had chosen me as a target, seated me at a table, borrowed my phone, and walked away with a map of me that would not erase. The last image she ever sent me, no words, just sight, was the worst kind of reminder. Even after everything I did, she'd proven that the simplest, most ordinary thing you can do on a date, handing someone your phone because they asked, can change you forever. The night started normal. Too normal, honestly. We'd met at this small Italian place he picked out. It wasn't fancy, but not a hole in the wall either. Just nice enough to feel like a real date. Candles flickered in little glass jars on the tables, and the smell of garlic and baked bread hung in the air. When I saw him walk in, my nerves eased. He looked exactly like his pictures. Maybe a little shorter, sure, but he carried himself with an easy kind of confidence, the type that fills in the gaps. He smiled wide when he spotted me, slid into the chair across from mine, and cracked a joke about how he nearly walked into the wrong restaurant on the way. I laughed. That was the first red flag. Though I didn't realize at the time, he made me laugh in the first 5 minutes. I almost never do that with strangers. He knew exactly how to disarm me. We ordered wine, breadsticks, pasta. He asked questions, where I'd grown up, what my job was like, what kind of music I listened to, but somehow every story wound back to him. His road trips, his old band, his car, which he mentioned more than once. I didn't mind. He was a good storyteller, sharp and animated like he practiced. People at other tables even glanced over when he laughed. I texted my friend before the food came, the usual safety check-in. He seems decent. No bad vibes. If only I knew. Halfway through dinner, he excused himself to the bathroom. Totally normal, right? He stood, adjusted his jacket, flashed me that easy smile again, and said, "Be right back." I nodded, twirled pasta around my fork, and didn't think twice. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked my phone, scrolled through my messages, even refreshed my socials just to kill the awkward waiting. The waiter came by with a polite smile and asked if everything was okay. I said yes, that my date had just stepped away for a minute. By 15 minutes, the unease had started to creep in. My wine sat untouched. The food cooled, steam fading into the dim restaurant air. A couple at the next table glanced at me curiously, probably wondering if I'd been stood up. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe he had stomach issues. Maybe there was a line. Maybe he was on the phone with someone important. But then 20 minutes ticked past. I pushed back my chair and stood, heart thudding. Something wasn't right. The hallway to the bathroom stretched long and narrow, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent bulb. I pushed open the door and froze. Empty. The smell of soap lingered in the air. The hum of the hand dryer echoed. But there was no one inside. No footsteps. No locked stall. I checked the hallway, peering around like maybe he'd step out to take a call. Nothing. Just the dull clatter of dishes from the kitchen. That's when it hit me. He wasn't in the building anymore. A heavy feeling sank into my stomach as I walked back through the restaurant. Our table sat there waiting. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 1 untouched. I reached for my jacket draped over the chair and froze. My purse wasn't there. At first I thought maybe I'd dropped it. I ducked under the table, scanned the floor, checked beside the chair. Nothing. My chest went tight. I rushed to the waiter, voice trembling, asking if someone had moved it. He looked puzzled, shook his head. And that's when the panic set. I hurried outside, the cold night air slapping me awake. The parking lot stretched under the yellow glow of the streetlights, cars lined neatly row by row. I scanned for his black sedan, the one he bragged about washing that morning, the one I'd ridden in just an hour earlier. Gone. The space where he had been parked was empty. I stood there hugging myself, my breath fogging the air, reality crashing over me in waves. He hadn't just left the date. He'd left with my purse. My wallet, my cards, my keys, my entire life, scooped up and carried away while I twirled pasta on a fork. I staggered back inside, cheeks hot with humiliation, hands trembling. The waiter met me halfway, concern etched across his face. I tried to explain, my voice breaking, but what could he do? The man was gone. I sat back down at the table, staring at the cold plate of pasta. Around me, forks clinked against plates, glasses clattered, conversations hummed. Life moved on. Nobody else realized that my night had collapsed in 20 minutes flat. I fumbled with my phone, the last lifeline I had. The battery was nearly dead. I'd left my charger in my purse. Of course, I used the last of its power to call my friend, my voice shaking as I told her what happened. She didn't hesitate. "Stay there. I'll come get you." While I waited, I replayed the evening in my head on a loop. The way he looked at me when I first sat down, too steady, like he was already cataloging me. The way he leaned in just close enough to make me feel comfortable. The way he excused himself so casually, not a flicker of guilt in his face. It all lined up now. The charm, the laughter, the wine. It had all been a setup, a distraction. He hadn't come for dinner. He'd come for the purse. By the time my friend pulled up, the restaurant had emptied out, chairs stacked on tables, waiters wiping down counters. The same waiter gave me a sympathetic nod as I left, like he was glad I wasn't walking into the night alone. I climbed into her car, the warmth enveloping me, and finally broke. Tears I'd been holding back spilled, my throat aching. She kept her hand on the wheel, eyes flicking to me every few seconds, murmuring that it would be okay. But it didn't feel okay. As the streetlights blurred past, my phone finally died in my hand, the screen black, cutting me off from the world. I leaned against the window, the glass cold against my skin, my mind spiraling. He hadn't just ditched me. He hadn't just taken my stuff. He'd gutted me clean, left me sitting invisible in a crowded restaurant, and walked away without anyone noticing. And the worst part, I never even saw him leave. She was the kind of girl who made you forget to check the time. We met for drinks at a bar near the station, small place with neon lights and sticky tables, but it didn't matter because she had this way of keeping your attention locked on her. Everything she said sounded effortless. The way she tilted her head, the way her eyes stayed on yours just a second too long, it pulled you in. A couple of rounds and she leaned closer, her voice softer now, and asked if I wanted to go back to her place. I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. It felt sudden, but not suspicious. She smiled like she'd been expecting me to say yes. We left the bar, her hand brushing against mine, guiding me through the crowd. I figured we'd head toward the row of apartments a few blocks over. Instead, she flagged down a cab. I climbed in beside her, the city lights sliding past as we drove further away from the busy streets. She didn't say much in the car, just kept glancing at me, humming quietly like she was in on some secret. The cab stopped outside a hotel. Not a fancy one, not a dive either, just one of those mid-range chain hotels with a bland logo glowing above the sliding doors. My chest tightened a little. A hotel wasn't what I expected. She walked in first, heels clicking against the tile floor, and I followed. The lobby smelled like air freshener and cheap carpet. A man at the front desk glanced up, then back down at his computer. She walked straight to the counter and gave him this sharp smile. The strange part came next. He didn't ask for her name. He looked at me. His eyes flicked between me and the screen in front of him, and he asked if I was checking him. My stomach twisted. Before I could answer, she leaned her elbow on the counter, grinning, and said it was under my name. I frowned, confused, but the man was already nodding. He slid a key card across the counter. Room on the 5th floor. Reservation already paid for, with my name printed on the slip. I picked it up with shaking fingers. My name. The right spelling. The right first and last. I hadn't booked anything. I hadn't even mentioned staying out tonight. My chest buzzed with unease, but she slipped her hand around my arm again, tugging me toward the elevators like everything was perfectly normal. Inside the elevator, my reflection in the mirrored walls looked pale, stiff. She was glowing beside me, relaxed, humming that same tune. The numbers above the doors blinked higher until we stopped at the 5th floor. The hallway stretched long and quiet, lined with identical doors. She walked confidently, like she knew exactly where to go, and stopped in front of the room. I slid the card into the lock, more out of shock than choice. The door clicked open. The room was spotless, the kind of sterile clean that only hotels have. Bed made tight, curtains drawn, TV remote centered on the desk. Nothing personal, nothing messy. Except one detail that made my skin crawl. On the desk beside the lamp was a folder, the hotel's logo stamped on the front. And inside it, papers with my name typed neatly at the top, printed check-in forms, a copy of my ID attached. But I hadn't given them my ID. I stood frozen in the doorway, the light from the hall spilling across the carpet. She brushed past me, sat on the edge of the bed, and kicked off her shoes like she owned the place. My eyes stayed locked on that folder, on my name printed over and over. I asked how this was possible, but she just tilted her head, smiling, saying nothing. The silence between us was heavier than anything I'd felt before. I flipped through the papers with shaking hands. Everything looked official. My address, my birthday, even the last 4 digits of my card number. Information I hadn't given her. She leaned back on the bed, staring at me with this calm expression, like she was watching to see what I'd do next. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. I glanced at the door, thinking about leaving, but my bag was heavy on my shoulder and my legs wouldn't move. The clock on the nightstand ticked too loud. My pulse matched it, each second stretching forever. I shoved the papers back into the folder and dropped it on the desk. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told her I needed some air, but she didn't answer. She just kept staring, her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and forced myself to walk calmly toward the elevator. The button lit up under my finger, and I waited, my chest tight, my breath shallow. I didn't look back. I couldn't. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped inside, my reflection warped in the mirrored walls again. Pale, shaken, but free. I didn't stop walking until I was outside, the cold night air cutting into my skin. I looked back once at the glowing hotel sign, but the windows were dark, the 5th floor hidden behind curtains. I didn't wait for a cab. I just kept moving, my legs carrying me block after block. The weight of that folder burned into my memory. She hadn't just invited me to her place. She'd built one around me. And she'd known my name before I ever told her. When he said he had a rooftop view, I pictured fairy lights, a couple chairs, maybe a skyline glittering in the distance. A little cliché, sure, but still the kind of romantic touch you secretly hope for on a first date. He lived in one of those luxury apartment towers downtown, the kind with the uniformed doormen, polished marble floors, and that faint bleach smell that clung to the air. Everything about the place screamed money. I felt slightly out of place walking into the lobby, like I was stepping into a life I didn't belong to. He met me there, smooth as ever, greeting me with a practiced smile and that confident air he carried so easily. He guided me toward the elevator, hand hovering lightly at my back like he'd done it 1,000 times. I thought we were heading to his apartment, but when he pressed the button for the very top floor, my eyebrows raised. Going big on the first date, I teased, trying to hide the nerves buzzing in my chest. He just smiled, lips curving like he knew something I didn't. I want you to see the view before anything else. The elevator ride was quiet, too quiet. Just the low hum of machinery and the soft reflection of our faces in the mirrored walls. I tried to steady my breathing, reminding myself it was just a date. He seemed nice, a little too confident maybe, but confidence isn't a crime. The doors opened onto a narrow hallway that felt colder than the lobby. At the end stood a heavy metal door. He pulled out a sleek black keycard, swiped it, and the lock clicked. My stomach fluttered as he pushed it open, and a rush of night air swept in. The rooftop spread out wide and empty, the city stretching in every direction. Lights twinkled like 1,000 stars laid flat across the ground, skyscrapers jutting up like jagged teeth. It should have been beautiful, but something about the openness unsettled me. There were no railings at the edges, just a low concrete lip, and beyond that, a straight drop into nothing. Off to the side sat 2 lounge chairs and a small table, already set with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I blinked, surprised. He planned this. "This is nice," I said, stepping onto the cold concrete. He followed, closing the door with a heavy thud. I didn't notice at first, but then came the sharp sound of a bolt sliding into place. I turned. He was standing casually by the door, sliding the lock across with an easy motion. "Why lock it?" I asked, trying for a laugh, though my voice came out thinner than I wanted. "To keep it private," he said smoothly, like it was obvious. I shouldn't even question it. The words echoed in my head, to keep it private. He poured the wine, handing me a glass, his eyes holding mine a beat too long. My throat was dry, but I didn't drink. I wrapped my fingers around the stem just to keep my hands from shaking. We sat in the lounge chairs. He leaned back, relaxed like he owned the night. I sat stiff, pretending to enjoy the view while my gaze kept darting back to the locked door. He started talking about his job, his travels, his expensive toys. His voice was smooth, confident, but the longer he talked, the stranger it sounded. Like a performance, like lines he rehearsed. Then came the questions. Not the normal kind. Not favorite movies or where I grew up. He wanted to know who I lived with, what floor my apartment was on, if I ever forgot to lock my door. I answered vaguely, my voice shaky, praying he wouldn't notice. Or maybe he did notice, and maybe that was the point. The wine glass sat heavy in my hand, untouched. I set it down on the table, the clink louder than I meant it to be. His eyes flicked to it, then back to me. His smile widened like he found my nerves amusing. Minutes dragged. He kept talking, rambling about investments, property, power. Words that should have sounded impressive, but up here, locked away from everyone, they felt more like threats. My chest tightened with every second. I tried to act casual, leaning back in the chair, pretending to admire the skyline. But inside, every nerve screamed. Finally, I stood. "I should use the bathroom," I said, forcing a smile. My voice sounded too bright, too fake, even to my own ears. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. Then he stood slowly, walking to the door. His hand rested on the bolt. For a moment, he didn't move. He just looked at me, eyes steady, smile stretched thin, testing me. My palms were slick, my chest aching. I forced a laugh, brushing at my hair like it was all nothing. "Don't worry, I won't get lost." The amusement in his eyes deepened. Then, with deliberate slowness, he slid the bolt back. The scrape of metal on metal echoed across the rooftop, sharp as a knife. The door swung open, and he gestured for me to go first. My legs felt stiff as I stepped past him, every instinct screaming not to turn my back. The hallway was suddenly too long, the elevator too far. My heart hammered as I jabbed the button, desperate for the doors to open. The ride down was silent, suffocating. The mirrored walls reflected his smile over and over, surrounding me. When the doors finally opened onto the lobby, I muttered something about needing to leave. Work tomorrow in the early morning. Any excuse. He didn't stop me. He just leaned casually against the wall, watching with that same smile as I hurried past the doorman and out into the night. The air outside was colder, sharper, but it felt like freedom. I didn't stop walking until the tower was just another part of the skyline, my chest still tight, my hands still trembling. I never touched the wine. I never looked back. And I never stopped thinking about how easy it had been for him to lock me in. I knew something was wrong the second she sat down. She slid into the booth across from me, set her purse carefully beside her, and just smiled. Not a hello, not even a casual, how are you? Just this wide, calm smile, her lips slightly parted, her eyes locked on mine like she'd already heard everything I was about to say. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe she was shy, maybe she was nervous, maybe she just didn't know how to start. I picked up the slack, introduced myself again, even though she obviously knew who I was, and cracked a weak joke about the traffic outside. Nothing. The smile stayed frozen, her head tilting slightly like she was nodding along to a song only she could hear. The neon sign of the bar buzzed and flickered, the O in open sputtering like it was about to burn out. I pointed at it, mumbling something about how the place looked like it belonged in a horror movie. She dipped her chin, that same slight nod, her eyes never leaving mine. A waiter came by and asked what we wanted to drink. I turned toward her, giving her the chance to answer. She didn't even glance at the menu. Just sat with that smile glued to her face. My stomach flipped. She'll have the house red, I blurted, panicking, and I'll take a beer. The waiter hesitated, his pen hovering over the pad, then scribbled it down and left without a word. The drinks came quick. Our glass of red sat between us, untouched. I took a sip of my beer, the cold fizz grounding me, and launched into small talk. Asked about her day, her job, her favorite food. Anything. Still nothing. Just nods at that tilted head listening pose, the smile pulling tighter the longer I spoke. Minutes dragged. Around us, forks clinked against plates, couples leaned in close over candles, conversations overlapped in a steady hum. But at our table, silence wrapped itself tight around us. I could hear myself swallow. Could hear the faint buzz of the neon from outside seeping through the glass. I told myself maybe she had social anxiety. Maybe she needed more time. So I doubled down, filling the void with stories from my week, exaggerating details, even throwing in a humiliating high school memory I usually saved for drunk nights with friends. Still nothing. Not a word. The food arrived. The waiter set down plates, his eyes darting between us with a flicker of unease. She didn't thank him. Didn't move until he was gone. Then slowly she picked up her fork. She ate mechanically, her eyes never leaving mine. Small, precise bites, each chew methodical like she was counting the motions. I couldn't eat. My fork scraped uselessly against the pasta, my appetite drowned under the weight of her gaze. I excused myself, bolting for the bathroom just to breathe. In the mirror, I looked pale, sweat beading at my hairline. I splashed water on my face, telling myself I was being dramatic. So what if she was shy? So what if she hadn't said much yet? People warm up eventually. When I came back, nothing had changed. She sat exactly as I left her, same smile, same eyes pinning me in place. My drink sat sweating on the table. Hers was empty. I hadn't seen her touch it. I sat back down, my chair creaking under my weight. The tension stretched tighter with every heartbeat. Her silence wasn't shy anymore. It was deliberate. I pulled my phone out under the table, pretending to check a message. Her eyes flicked down for the first time, landing on the glow of the screen. For a second, her smile widened almost imperceptibly. I shoved the phone away, heat crawling up my neck. Are you okay? I asked, my voice breaking. Do you want to leave? Her head tilted again. One slow nod, that was all. Around us, life carried on. A group at the bar laughed loud, clinking glasses. A couple shared a plate of tire mystery at the booth behind me. To them, it probably looked normal, just two people on a date, one talking more than the other. Only I knew how wrong it was. Only I felt the weight of those eyes drilling into me, memorizing me. The waiter returned with a check, glancing nervously at her before asking if we wanted it split. I didn't even look at her this time. I just threw cash into the folder, my hands trembling, desperate to get out. She stood when I did, lifting her purse in one smooth motion, sliding the strap over her shoulder. Still no words, still smiling. We walked out together, the night air cutting sharp against my burning skin. The restaurant's neon cast a sickly red glow across the sidewalk. She stayed one step behind me, her heels clicking against the pavement in perfect rhythm with mine. At the corner, I turned to say goodbye, ready to end it, ready to put the night behind me. She stood under the streetlight, her face bright in the glow, that smile fixed in place. She nodded once. I muttered something about getting home safe, fumbling for my phone. My thumb hovered over the rideshare app, my hands shaking. I glanced up again. She was gone. Not walking away, not crossing the street, just gone. The sidewalk was empty, the street stretching in both directions under buzzing lamps. My chest hammered, the silence around me too thick. My phone screen glared back, but my fingers shook too hard to type. All I could see was her face burn into my mind, that smile, wide, patient, unmoving. And the worst part, the part that kept gnawing at me long after I stumbled into a cab and locked my door behind me, wasn't just that she'd vanished. It was that she hadn't said a single word the entire night. Not one. At first, I thought it was one of those rare smooth dates. He showed up right on time, not 5 minutes late like most of them. He held the door for me when I walked into the restaurant, even cracked a joke before we made it to the table. That first laugh loosened something in my chest, just enough to make me believe maybe the night wouldn't be so bad. The restaurant itself was bright, warm, the hum of voices filling the air. Families sat in booths, couples leaned in close over glasses of wine. The clatter of silverware and the hiss of something sizzling in the kitchen made it feel alive. Safe, not one of those dim, moody places where you have to squint at the menu. He was easy enough. He asked questions, actually listened, nodded along like he cared. When he made jokes, they weren't amazing, but they landed well enough to keep me smiling. I found myself relaxing in small increments, the tension in my shoulders easing as I twirled pasta on my fork and rambled about work, random little stories that I usually kept to myself on first dates. He wasn't perfect. His laugh was a little too loud, his cologne a little too heavy, but nothing about him screamed red flag either. That alone felt like a win. Dinner stretched on. The appetizer disappeared, plates were cleared, and we ordered another round of drinks. I kept waiting for something awkward to happen. A lull in the conversation, a weird brag, an offhand comment that made me cringe. But it never came. He paid attention. He smiled at the right times. He made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't wasting my time. It wasn't until the second drink was half gone, until the conversation had hit that soft plateau, that I knew what I had to do. I wasn't feeling it. Not really. There was no spark, no pull, no ache in my stomach that made me want to see him again. And if I'd been on enough dates to know that truth early, I figured I owed him the decency of honesty. Better that than ghosting. Better that than pretending to be interested, and then vanishing later. So I smiled, leaned forward a little, and told him politely, gently, that I didn't think we'd be going out again. The second the words left my mouth, everything changed. His face shifted instantly like a switch had been thrown. The easy smile, the soft nodding, the practiced charm. It all vanished. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. His eyes narrowed, darkening in a way that made my stomach knot. He leaned back in his chair, shoulders stiff, exhaling through his nose like he was holding something in. For one brief second, I thought he might just take it. Say, okay, thanks for being honest. Maybe look disappointed, maybe even annoyed, but then let it go. That wasn't what happened. He snapped. His voice came out sharp, louder than the background hum of the restaurant. Louder than the clink of forks, louder than the low music playing overhead. Why? He demanded, his words hard and fast, not curious, not hurt, accusatory, like I just insulted him in front of the entire room. My heart stuttered. My cheeks burned hot, the weight of a dozen eyes suddenly shifting toward us. I opened my mouth to answer, but he didn't give me the chance. His voice barreled forward, spilling out in angry waves. He listed reasons I was wrong. How well the date had gone. How much effort he put in. How women like me never gave decent men a chance. His tone rose with every sentence, the volume climbing higher, sharper, until forks froze in midair and conversations died out around us. People were staring now. A family across the aisle paused with wide eyes. The couple behind him leaned back in their booth, pretending not to look but clearly listening. I sat frozen, gripping my napkin so hard the paper shredded in my fist. My pulse thumped loud in my ears, drowning out half his rant. I tried to explain, my voice barely above a whisper, but he cut me off, slamming his palm against the table so hard that glasses rattled. The manager started moving toward us, cautious, measured, like approaching a cornered animal. But when he got close, the man at my table barked louder, throwing up a hand as if to warn him off. "Don't you dare," he snapped, his words ricocheting across the restaurant. The manager froze. Around us, people whispered. Some shook their heads, some looked away, but no one stepped in. The air was thick, heavy, every second stretched taut like it might snap. He kept going louder, angrier, spitting out words like bullets. How I didn't know what I wanted, how I'd regret this, how I was wasting his time. His face twisted, red with rage, veins standing out at his neck. The charming man I'd spent the evening with was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone terrifying. The waiter appeared with a check, his hands trembling. He set it down quickly, almost like he was afraid of touching the table too long, and retreated. I lunged for it, desperate to move, desperate to do something. My hands shook as I shoved cash inside, not even counting, just needing the transaction done. He didn't notice. He was still ranting, still drilling holes into me with every word. I stood, my legs stiff, heart hammering so hard I thought I might collapse. His eyes snapped to me, wild, daring me to move. For a second, I thought he might stand too, but I kept going. The moment I stepped away, his voice spiked louder than ever, his words echoing off the walls. A child in the corner booth started crying, the high-pitched sobs cutting through the tension. People flinched in their seats. A woman covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't look back, couldn't. I walked fast, past the bar, past the wide-eyed manager, past every single pair of eyes that tracked me to the door. The night air hit me like a slap, cool and sharp against my burning face. My hands trembled so badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock my car. I climbed inside, slammed the locks down, and sat there heaving, staring at the glow of the restaurant windows. Through the glass, I could still see him. He was standing now, still yelling, still throwing his rage into the room long after I had left. I started the engine, the wheels slippery under my damp palms, and drove away. The road blurred under my headlights, the sound of his voice still ringing in my ears, echoing in the hollow space of my chest. The whole date had been fine, normal, until the second it wasn't. And in that second, he showed exactly who he really was. The night started off normal enough. We picked a diner-style restaurant, the kind with booths and neon buzzing above the windows. She showed up looking way better than her profile, smiling, sliding into the seat across from me like she actually wanted to be there. I ordered a burger, she got a salad, and for the first 20 minutes it felt almost easy. We joked about the weird decorations on the walls, the endless refills of watered-down soda, the old couple sitting 2 booths away who hadn't said a word to each other since we walked in. She laughed at my dumb jokes, leaned her chin on her hand, and it almost felt like the kind of date you'd want to brag about later. Then I noticed him. A guy walked in through the front doors, and the whole atmosphere at the table flipped without her saying a word. She froze mid-laugh, her eyes flicking past me. Her smile dropped, her posture stiffened, and I knew instantly whoever had just entered was someone she didn't want to see. I turned my head and saw him storming toward us. Tall, broad, face twisted with fury. His hands clenched, his steps heavy, his eyes locked on her like nothing else in the room existed. The other customers noticed too, forks pausing, voices dropping. Before I could even ask what was happening, he was at our table. His voice boomed over the entire restaurant, loud, vicious, words spilling fast and sharp. He wasn't yelling at me. Not at first. Every word was aimed straight at her. She sat there rigid, not answering, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tight her knuckles went white. I glanced around for help, but the servers were frozen behind the counter, eyes wide, unsure if they should intervene. The man kept going, his voice rising with each sentence, spitting accusations I couldn't fully catch because of how fast he was shouting. Bits and pieces cut through, about her leaving him, about betrayal, about how she thought she could just walk away. I tried to speak up, tried to calm him, but the second my voice entered, His rage snapped onto me. His eyes burned holes through me, his words turned sharp in my direction, his volume climbing higher. He leaned over the table, pointing, veins bulging in his neck. The entire diner was silent except for him. My stomach twisted. The air felt thick, heavy with tension, every sound amplified, the buzzing neon, the clatter of a dropped fork, the uneven breaths I was forcing out. She finally moved. She whispered something under her breath, her voice so low I couldn't hear it, but it only made him explode louder. His fist slammed against the table, making the glasses jump, the ketchup bottle tip over. People at nearby booths flinched. One family grabbed their kids and hurried toward the door. The manager appeared at the edge of the room, hesitant, trying to edge closer. But the guy was too unpredictable, too volatile. No one wanted to be the one to push him over the edge. I could feel every eye in place on us. My date sat frozen, tears forming in her eyes but refusing to fall, her lips pressed together tight. The man's words poured over her, venom and fury and obsession tangled together, loud enough that the whole restaurant now knew a piece of their history whether we wanted to or not. I tried to stand, my chair scraping back, but he slammed his paw on the table again, glaring at me with a look that froze me in place. His voice cracked, not with sadness, but with unhinged anger, spitting out phrases that made my chest ache. He wasn't letting go. He wasn't moving on. He wanted everyone here to know she belonged to him, no matter how many people watched. The diner had turned into a stage, and we were trapped in the spotlight. The manager finally stepped closer, calling for him to calm down, saying he had to leave. That only set him off more. He whirled around, shouting at the staff, his arms flailing, knocking into a chair. It toppled over, clattering against the floor. A couple near the door slipped outside, not wanting to stick around to see where this was headed. My pulse hammered in my ears. My mind screamed to leave, to get out, but my legs wouldn't move. I was stuck between wanting to protect her and wanting to vanish. She finally stood. Slow, shaky, but steady enough. Her voice was low, trembling, but firm. I couldn't hear what she said over the pounding in my chest, but whatever it was, it stunned him for half a second. His mouth stayed open, no words coming out, his body shaking with rage he couldn't contain anymore. Then, just as fast as he'd entered, he turned. His fists clenched, his breathing ragged, he stormed out the same door as he came in. The glass rattled as they slammed shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. The diner felt like it had been cracked open and left bleeding. She stood there, trembling, her eyes staring at the door like he might come back any second. My throat was too tight to speak, my body too tense to move. The manager came over, asking if we were okay, offering to call someone. She shook her head without a word, just grabbed her purse, mumbled something I couldn't catch, and walked out into the night. I stayed sitting there, my burger cold, my drink flat, the entire room buzzing with whispers. Everyone staring, no one saying a thing. The date was over, the night was ruined. And all I could think about was how fast everything had flipped. 1 second laughter over greasy food. The next, chaos tearing the room apart. And somewhere out there, he was still lurking. I walked into the restaurant expecting a normal first date. Nothing special, nothing wild. Just the usual mix of nerves and low expectations. I'd picked out the outfit hours earlier, checked my makeup in the car mirror, and scrolled through his profile one last time to remind myself who I was even meeting. On the way in, I checked my phone 3 separate times, telling myself to relax, to breathe. I spotted him right away, tucked into a booth at the back. He looked like his pictures, maybe a little older, but not in a catfish sort of way, just the natural years settling in. For a moment, I actually felt relieved. At least it wasn't starting with disappointment. Then I noticed he wasn't alone. Another man sat next to him. Same booth, same side, their shoulders nearly touching. When I approached, both of them looked up at the same time, their faces calm but unreadable. Their expressions were too similar, like mirrors, blank, patient, waiting. My date smiled faintly and gestured to the sea across from them. No explanation, no introduction, just a little wave of his hand as if this was completely normal. I froze. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe they were wrapping up a meeting. Maybe it was a roommate he couldn't shake off. Maybe he just didn't want to eat alone before I got there. But if that were the case, why hadn't he said anything? Why were they sitting side by side, waiting? My stomach tightened, but I slid into the booth anyway. The cushion felt stiff under me, the air suddenly warmer, heavier. I kept waiting for him to explain, to introduce the other man, to make it less strange. But silence stretched on, taut and unbroken. The waiter came by with menus, his polite smile flickering when he noticed the odd arrangement. The second man didn't even touch his menu. He just sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on me, while my date flipped casually through the pages. I ordered water, my voice a little too high, and the waiter left quickly, maybe sensing the tension. I tried to start conversation. Asked how his day had been. His answers were short, clipped like placeholders. Each time he spoke, his head tilted slightly toward the man beside him, like sharing the moment, like conferring silently. The buddy never spoke, never smiled, never blinked much. Just kept his eyes locked on me. It felt like being interviewed without questions. My skin prickled under the weight of their attention. Every sip of water, every nervous shift in my seat, their eyes followed. My chest buzzed with panic, but I forced small smiled, hoping the awkwardness would crack. It didn't. Halfway through, I realized my phone was the only comfort I had. I slipped it from my bag, thumb flicking over the screen just to feel connected to something outside of that booth. Both of them leaned forward at the same time, not reaching, not saying anything, just moving closer, their gazes sharp, following the glow of the phone. My fingers trembled. I shoved it back into my bag quickly. Their posture relaxed again, almost in unison. The thought crossed my mind, then leave. Just stand up, mutter an excuse, and walk out the door. But something about the way they watched me froze my legs. Their silence wasn't passive. It was deliberate, calculated, like they were testing to see what I'd do. The food arrived eventually, plates sliding onto the table with forced cheer from the waiter. Neither man touched his dish at first. They both stared at me, waiting. I hesitated, then picked up my fork, stabbing at the pasta. Only when I lifted the first bite to my mouth did they finally pick up their utensils, slow, synchronized, deliberate. I chewed without tasting. My appetite was gone, my throat tight. I tried to break the tension with a joke, a nervous laugh bubbling out, but it died instantly in the air. They didn't even blink. Minutes dragged like hours. The sound of the restaurant around us felt muffled, distant. Plates clinked, glasses clattered. People laughed at nearby tables, but it all seemed to happen in another world. At our table, there was only silence and the weight of their stares. I excused myself to the bathroom just to breathe. Both of their heads turned in unison, their eyes following me until I disappeared down the hall. Inside, I gripped the sink and stared at my reflection. Pale skin, wide eyes, sweat at my hairline. My chest rose and fell too fast, my stomach flipping with dread. I thought about sneaking out the back, about running, but my purse was still at the booth. My keys, my wallet, everything. If I left them, I'd be stranded. When I came back, nothing had changed. They sat exactly as I'd left them, posture identical, eyes unblinking. My purse sat neatly on the table now, closer to them than to my side. My throat tightened as I slid back into the booth, forcing a weak smile, my hands shaking under the table. The check came. My date picked it up before I could move, pulled out cash, and slid the receipt into his pocket. No words, just a sharp glance at me, then at his companion like a signal passed between them. Finally, we stood to leave. Relief flooded my body just from standing upright, my legs stiff, my head light. They walked ahead of me, side by side, shoulders brushing. I trailed behind, clutching my purse strap so tightly my knuckles ached. Outside, the night air was cool, but it didn't calm me. He turned to me, smiling faintly again, and thanked me for coming out. Just that. No apology, no explanation, no mention of his silent shadow. The buddy stood still beside him, eyes fixed on me one last time, heavy and cold. Neither offered to walk me in my car. They didn't step closer. They didn't move at all. They just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching as I backed away. My legs felt heavy, each step forced, my breath shallow. I didn't dare turn around until I reached my car. I slid inside, locked the doors instantly, and jammed the keys into the ignition with trembling hands. Before pulling out, I glanced in the rearview mirror. They were still there, both of them, standing under the dim glow of the restaurant sign, still side by side, still staring as I drove away. I didn't stop until I was miles from the place, the road empty around me, the silence of the car swallowing me whole. My chest ached, my stomach churned, and no amount of deep breathing calmed the buzzing panic under my skin. The date hadn't been a conversation. It hadn't even been a dinner. It had been a test, and I still don't know what I was being tested for. The date itself was fine. Not amazing, not terrible. Just one of those middle ground nights where you know you probably won't see each other again. But it's not a disaster either. We picked a low-key spot, the kind of restaurant that smelled faintly of fryer oil and carpet cleaner, with laminated menus that stuck a little to your fingers. She showed up on time and smiled when she saw me, hugged me lightly. We ordered food, swapped stories, laughed a few times. Nothing deep, nothing personal. Her job sounded boring, mine wasn't much better. She liked hiking, I didn't. I liked horror movies, she didn't. It was surface-level talk, polite, and safe. By the time the check came, I already knew we weren't clicking. She must have felt the same. We split the bill without awkwardness, and outside she hugged me again. Polite, quick. "Thanks for dinner," she said before walking toward the glow of her waiting ride share. I watched her door shut, the taillights fade down the street, then headed to my car. Nothing about it felt off. Just another day I'd chalk up as fine. The drive home was quiet. Radio low, my brain half on autopilot. I kept replaying the night in my head, thinking about how I describe it to my friends. Just okay. No spark. Nothing worth the story. My eyelids felt heavy, the hum of the tires lulling me into that calm, blank state that comes after a long day. I wasn't even halfway home when blue and red lights flickered in my rear view. My stomach dropped, instantly. I checked the speedometer, right at a limit. I wasn't swerving, hadn't rolled through any stop signs. My car was registered insured. Nothing about me screamed, "Pull me over." But I signaled anyway, pulled to the shoulder, gravel crunching under my tires. The cruiser slid in behind me, headlights glaring too bright in the mirror. A spotlight flicked on, flooding the inside of my car with harsh white light. My chest tightened, my grip on the steering wheel too stiff. The door creaked open behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached. My throat felt dry as I waited, ears filled with the thump of my heartbeat. The officer leaned down into the beam of my headlights. His face was shadowed under the brim of his hat. When he spoke, it was the first thing that made my skin crawl. He said my name. My first and last name, clear and deliberate, rolling off his tongue like he practiced it. I froze. My wallet was still on the passenger seat, my ID untouched. My plates could give in my last name, sure, but not the first. And not with that strange, steady certainty. Yes. My voice cracked. He didn't ask for my license, didn't explain the stop. He just repeated my name, slower this time, like he was confirming it belonged to me. Then he asked where I had been tonight. I stammered something about dinner, mentioned the restaurant. My throat was tight, every word awkward. He nodded like he already knew, like he was checking a box in his head. His flashlight beams swept through the car, lingering on the empty passenger seat, the crumpled napkin from the restaurant, the condensation sliding down my water bottle. He stared at each object too long, like he was cataloging evidence. Finally, he straightened. "Sit tight," he said. I gripped the wheel harder, pulse pounding in my ears as he walked back toward his car. The red and blue lights kept flashing, painting the road in dizzying color. Minutes passed. Too many. I glanced in the rearview mirror again and again, but the cruiser just sat there. Engine idling, lights pulsing. No movement. I couldn't even see him inside. My stomach twisted tighter the longer I waited. The silence pressed in until I was holding my breath without realizing it. Finally, the footsteps came back. He leaned down again, same shadowed face, same steady voice. "Drive safe," he said. That was it. No explanation, no ticket, no warning. Nothing. He stepped away, back into his cruiser, and the lights shut off. Darkness swallowed the road again. I sat frozen for a full 30 seconds, headlights illuminating nothing but gravel and trees. My hands shook against the wheel. When I finally pulled back onto the road, every muscle in my body felt coiled, my breath shallow. The drive felt endless after that. Every pair of headlights behind me made my chest clench. Every shadow on the roadside looked like another cruiser waiting. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my whole body ached from tension. I sat there in the car for 10 minutes, engine ticking, before I could force myself to move. My chest hurt from how hard my heart had been pounding. Inside, I locked the door immediately, then double-checked it, then checked again. My hands fumbled with my phone. I couldn't let it go. How did he know my name? I searched online for reports of local traffic stops. Nothing. Checked the city's police blotter. Nothing. I called the non-emergency number, voiced low and shaky as I asked about a traffic stop in my area. The dispatcher checked, came back confused. There was no record of any officer pulling over a car that matched mine tonight. No record at all. I hung out, my hand trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. The glow of the screen lit the empty living room around me. My chest felt tight again, throat dry, skin prickling with cold. Whoever had pulled me over hadn't logged it, hadn't written a ticket, hadn't asked for ID. He'd just known who I was. The more I thought about it, the colder I felt. The date had been so normal, boring even. She'd smiled, hugged me, walked away like nothing was wrong. But somewhere between her disappearing into her rideshare and me heading home, someone had been waiting. Someone who already knew my full name. I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling, every muscle tense. The phantom sound of sirens echoed in my ears. Every flash of headlights through the blinds made me jolt. By morning, I hadn't slept a second. My head ached, my eyes burned, and the unease still sat heavy in my chest. That's when my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. It just said my name. I went into the date with low expectations. We'd only been messaging for a week, nothing too deep, just small talk that felt harmless. He picked a restaurant, a little Italian spot tucked between a laundromat and a pharmacy. It wasn't fancy, but it was packed enough that I felt safe. He was already sitting when I arrived, waving me over with a wide smile. He looked like his photos, maybe a little sharper around the edges, but not enough to set off alarms. I sat down, ordered a drink, and tried to shake off the nerves. At first, it was fine. He asked the usual questions: work, hobbies, places I'd traveled. His voice had this calm rhythm to it, steady and practiced. He laughed at his own jokes more than I did, but I brushed it off. Dates are awkward, right? Halfway through the meal, after the breadbasket was gone and the plates clattered around us, he reached under the table. My stomach tightened, expecting maybe flowers, maybe some cliché attempt at a gift. Instead, he slid a wrapped package across the table. I froze. It was rectangular, medium-sized, covered in shiny paper that looked like it belonged on a Christmas present. I laughed nervously, asked what it was, but he just pushed it closer, eyes locked on mine. I unwrapped it slowly, the paper crinkling loud in the crowded restaurant. Inside was a frame. A black wooden frame with glass, so clean it reflected the lights above. And behind the glass was a photo of me. Not a posed photo. Not something from my profile. It was me walking out of the grocery store weeks ago. My hair tied up, a tote bag slung over my shoulder, earbuds in. I remembered the day because it had rained, and in the corner of the photo you could see the wet pavement reflecting car headlights. My stomach dropped to the floor. My hand went clammy against the frame. He watched me, smiling, waiting for my reaction like he'd just given me jewelry. I stared at the picture, my heart pounding so loud I swore other people could hear it. I had never posed for this, never shared it. Someone had taken it without me knowing. I finally looked up, my voice catching in my throat, but he just nodded, satisfied. His eyes didn't leave mine, like he was studying every twitch of my face. The photo felt heavier the longer I held it. The glass pressed against my palm, cold and sharp. My reflection stared back faintly, pale and shaken, overlapping the image of myself weeks earlier, casual, unaware of being watched. I set it on the table carefully, my hands trembling. He leaned forward, brushing the corner of the frame with his finger like he was proud. The restaurant buzzed around us, clinking cutlery, bursts of laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine. But at our booth, it felt dead silent. I tried to keep my face calm, tried not to let my panic show, but inside everything screamed to get out. My throat was dry, my chest tight. I forced myself to ask him where he got it, but he just smiled wider, his teeth catching in the dim light. No answer, just silence. The waiter came by, asking if we wanted dessert. I shook my head fast, pushing my plate away, but he kept staring at the photo, one hand resting on it protectively. The waiter glanced between us, uneasy, but walked off without pressing. I sat stiff, every muscle tense, my legs itching to move. He finally leaned back, satisfied like he'd proven something. His eyes still pinned me in place, daring me to react. The frame sat there between us, heavier than anything I'd ever been given. My face in glass, captured without consent, wrapped up like a prize. I excused myself to the bathroom, my voice shaking. I clutched my bag, slid out of the booth, and walked fast, the tile floor echoing under my shoes. Inside the bathroom, I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection. My skin was pale, my lips dry, and my eyes wide with panic. I replayed the moment over and over. The wrapping paper, the frame, the way he'd smile like it was the most normal thing in the world. I debated calling someone, but my phone battery was low. My friend's number blinked at me on the screen, but my fingers froze. I didn't want to explain. Didn't even know how to. I waited until I couldn't anymore, then walked back out. The booth was still there, the photo still sitting upright on the table, but he was gone. The check was paid, the seat empty, just the frame waiting for me. My chest tightened. I didn't touch it. I didn't even slow down. I walked straight past, out the door, into the cool night air. On the sidewalk I turned, staring through the glass at the empty booth. The frame gleamed under the lights, my own face staring back from across the room. I hurried to my car, locked the doors, and sat shaking, my breath coming fast and shallow. My eyes scanned the lot, every shadow feeling like it might move. I drove home with my hands clenched tight on the wheel, headlights blurring past, stomach twisting with every turn. When I got inside, I locked the door and checked every window twice. My phone buzzed with a new notification, a message from him. It was a photo. Me sitting in my car outside the restaurant, taken seconds earlier. I wasn't nervous until I saw her in person. She looked way better than her pictures, almost too good. Gorgeous, dressed sharp, every detail about her put together like she'd stepped out of a fashion spread. Perfect hair, flawless makeup, clothes that somehow looked expensive without being flashy. The kind of girl you'd double take on the street, the kind of girl who should have had 100 better options than me. Yet somehow she'd match with me. We met at a bar downtown, one of those places with dim amber lighting, music just loud enough to make conversation lean in close, and cocktails priced higher than they should have been. The kind of place that tried hard to be classy, but mostly attracted people trying hard to look classy. She smiled when I walked up, waved me over. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal, good, even. She laughed at my jokes, leaned closer when I spoke, her perfume drifting toward me, subtle but distracting. And she kept this steady, unbroken eye contact that was flattering at first, almost electric. But after a while, that eye contact felt off. Too strong, too deliberate. I told myself it was nerves. First dates were always weird. She answered my questions politely, but rarely asked much in return. I filled the space easily enough, work stories, travel mishaps, dumb things friends had done, but she never really dug deeper, just smiled, tilted her head, let me talk. Her smile never slipped, not once. And her glass, her perfectly clear, sweating glass, barely moved. She held it sure, but her drink always seemed just as full as when the waiter had set it down. I brushed it off as paranoia. I was overthinking. Always did. About halfway through, I excused myself to the bathroom. Not because I needed it, but because my chest felt tight and I needed to reset. The men's room smelled of cleaner and stale beer. I locked myself in a stall, sat on the closed lid, and pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking more than I wanted to admit. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I needed reassurance. Maybe some part of me already knew something was wrong. I opened Tinder, searched for our chat. Gone. Not just the chat, her entire profile. Vanished. No photos, no bio, no name. Like she'd never been there at all. My stomach plummeted. I refreshed, closed the app, rewinded. Nothing. I tried searching her name through my contacts, scrolling back through old notifications. Anything to prove I hadn't imagined her. Still nothing. She had unmatched me or deleted her account while we were still on the date. I sat frozen, the screen's glow painting my face pale. Outside the stall door, the muffled noise of the bar carried on. Clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, a bass line thudding. It sounded far away, unreal. My throat was bone dry. I replayed every second, the way she never asked about me, The way her drink stayed full, the way her eyes locked on mine, too long, too steady. Something was wrong. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and forced myself up. At the sink, I splashed water on my face. My reflection looked pale, tense, eyes wide with something that felt too close to fear. I forced a breath, forced another. Told myself to act normal. When I walked back, she was waiting exactly as before. Perfect posture. Faint smile. Eyes fixed on me like I'd never left. My half-empty drink sat where I'd left it. Her glass hadn't moved, not a drop gone. I slid into the seat, my grin forced, my hands restless against the table. I tried to pick up the conversation, but my words stumbled. She didn't notice or pretended not to. She just smiled and nodded, her eyes never blinking for too long. The bar felt louder now, oppressive. Every laugh from the booth behind us was sharp, every clink of glass too close. Around us the world was alive, but at our table it was frozen still. And I couldn't stop thinking about that blank screen, about how her profile hadn't vanished later, after the date, but right then. In the exact moment I was out of sight. I told myself I'd leave early, cut it short. Safer that way. When I finally excused myself, I said something about an early morning, tossed cash on the table before the check even came. My smile was weak, shaky. She tilted her head, still smiling, and agreed without protest. That almost made it worse. We walked outside together. The street was damp from earlier rain, neon signs buzzing overhead, reflections stretching across the wet pavement. She didn't ask where I had parked. Didn't ask if I wanted to see her again. Just smiled one more time, gave a small wave, and walked off into the night. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her disappear down the street. My chest was tight, my phone heavy in my pocket. When I finally sat in my car, I opened Tinder again, scrolling desperately, refreshing. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe she'd reappear. But my matches list scrolled endlessly, and she wasn't there. It was like she'd been erased. I drove home in silence, radio off, streetlights sliding past like smudges of orange. My thoughts churned, tangled, replaying every second with her, looking for something I'd missed. At home, I tried again on my laptop. Typed her name into searches, combed through social media, dug through old notifications. Nothing. It was as if she'd never existed at all. But she had. She'd sat across from me. Ordered a drink she never touched. Watched me with those perfect, unblinking eyes. Smiled like she already knew how the night would end. And then, halfway through, she'd vanished from the only proof I had that she was ever real. I shut the laptop with a snap, the room instantly darker. My apartment felt too quiet, the hum of the fridge too loud. I checked my lock twice, then 3 times. My chest ached with the weight of unease. When I finally lay in bed, I kept seeing her in my head. The tilt of her head. The faint smile that never slipped. The way she walked away without a word. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking off into the night, pausing once to glance back at me, her smile bright under the glow of the neon. And no matter how tightly I shut my eyes, she stayed there. Burned behind my eyelids long after the night was over. The date itself wasn't awful. Not great, not terrible, just one of those long evenings where the conversation never really clicked. He talked too much about his job, filling the air with stories I barely cared about. I laughed at a few things that weren't that funny, smiled when I had to, and kept glancing at my phone under the table, counting minutes until it would feel polite to leave. When the check came, I told him I should probably head home. He smiled, too eager, too fast, and said he'd walk me back. I tried to brush it off, said it wasn't necessary, but he insisted. He used the word gentleman like it meant something. I didn't want to argue. The night air was cool when we stepped outside, the streetlights buzzing faintly. The sidewalks were mostly empty, just a few stragglers from nearby bars, voices echoing against the buildings. We walked side by side, his steps just a little too close, his cologne faint but cloying their quiet. He talked the whole way, his voice carrying too loudly in the silence. I nodded along, giving half-hearted answers, my stomach tight with unease. All I could think about was him knowing exactly where I lived. By the time we reached my building, I just wanted it to be over. I smiled weakly, thanked him, and turned my attention to the door. My keys jingled in my hand as I slid the right one into the lock, already imagining the relief of shutting the door behind me. But the lock didn't turn. I frowned and tried again. Nothing. The key slid in smooth but refused to twist no matter how much pressure I put on it. My chest tightened. I jiggled it harder, gritting my teeth, my bag slipping down my shoulder. Behind me, I heard him chuckle softly. That sound made my stomach drop faster than the stubborn lock. I turned slightly, the key still jammed in the door. He was standing just behind me, too close. His face had changed. His polite date-night smile was gone, replaced with something stretched, deliberate. His eyes glinted under the dim hallway light as he leaned in. He said he changed the lock. The words hit harder than if he'd screamed. Calm, casual, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. My blood went cold. My fingers slipped off the key. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign he was joking. But his smile didn't move. It just widened. I forced out a laugh, weak and shaky, the sound thin in the empty hallway. My voice cracked as I asked him what he meant, but he only tilted his head, that grin frozen like it had been carved there. I turned back to the door, tried again, twisting the key so hard my knuckles whitened. Still nothing. The lock wouldn't budge. The hallway felt too quiet. The hum of the old fluorescent light above us buzzed loud in my ears. The smell of dust and stale carpet pressed down on me. He stepped closer. His shoes echoed against the tile. I could feel the warmth of him at my back, his presence heavy, suffocating. My mind spun. I had left this morning like normal. I had locked the same door with the same key. Nothing had been wrong. Now it was wrong. I yanked the key out and spun around, pressing my spine against the door. He was right there, inches away. His grin didn't falter. His eyes flicked down to the keys clenched in my fist, then back to my face. My throat burned, my palms slick with sweat. I asked him what he was talking about. My voice came out thin, unsteady. He didn't answer. He just stared, smiling, like my panic was exactly the reaction he wanted. The silence between us stretched too long. My pulse hammered in my ears. The hallway behind him gaped empty and dim, no one around to hear me if I screamed. I slid sideways, inching toward the stairwell, my bag strap cutting into my shoulder from how tightly I clutched it. His body shifted with me, blocking the way without moving fast. Deliberate, controlled, like he was in no rush. My breath came shallow fast. My chest ached with each one. I gripped my phone in my pocket, thumb hovering over it, but his eyes flicked down again, sharp and knowing. I froze. I didn't want him to see me reaching for it. Seconds stretched like hours. My legs trembled, but I forced myself forward, muttering something about needing to check with the landlord. My voice was flat, too loud in the silence. His smile twitched, but he didn't step aside. He just stood there, blocking me, watching, waiting. Finally, I shoved past. My shoulder brushed against his arm, hot, solid. My pulse roared in my ears as I half walked, half ran down the hallway, my shoes slapping against the thin carpet. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The stairwell door clanged open under my hand. I stumbled down the concrete steps, the echoes ricocheting around me. My breaths came ragged, harsh in the silence. Every shadow stretched too long. Every creak of the old stairwell made me think he was behind me. When I hit the ground floor, I burst outside. The night air hit me sharp, cold, filling my lungs too fast. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, fumbling the numbers, the glow blinding me in the dark. I didn't stop moving. My feet carried me down the sidewalk, further and further from the building, from him. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I couldn't. The thought of stepping back into that hallway, of seeing his grin under that buzzing light, was too much. Because his calm words, that soft chuckle, and the way the lock had refused me burned into my mind. I ended up crashing on a friend's couch, shaking wide awake until morning. I didn't tell her everything. Just said the date was weird, that I didn't feel safe. She tried to reassure me, said maybe the lock had jammed, maybe I was tired and overthinking. But I knew. I knew how smooth that key had slid into the lock, how it had refused me anyway. And I knew the way he looked at me, like he was waiting for me to find out. Somewhere above in that hallway, he was probably still standing there, waiting. The night wasn't supposed to go anywhere. Drinks, maybe some food, then a quick goodbye. That was all I had in mind. First dates are like that more often than not. Polite. A little awkward, forgettable. But she was different in person. Sharp, confident, and way prettier than her pictures. She had that easy charisma that made every word land just right, like she'd been on dates 1,000 times and knew exactly how to keep the other person hooked. The conversation came smoother than I expected. I found myself laughing, leaning closer, feeling like maybe this wasn't just going to be another forgettable night. By the time the bar began thinning out and the music dropped lower, I wasn't ready to just part ways. Outside, under the weak glow of a buzzing streetlight, she smiled at me. It wasn't a shy smile. It was deliberate, warm but edged with something I couldn't place. She leaned closer, and before I could think of what to say next, she asked if I wanted to come up. My stomach jumped. I hesitated for only a second before nodding. We climbed a narrow staircase to the top floor of a tired old building. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and stale carpet, the kind of scent that never leaves no matter how many times it's cleaned. She had unlocked the door without hesitation, pushed it open, and waved me inside. Her apartment was simple but surprisingly tidy. Couch tucked neatly against the wall, a couple of framed prints, generic landscapes that looked like they came from the clearance section of some home goods store. A coffee table sat centered on the rug, topped with a remote and a neat stack of magazines. She tossed her bag onto the counter and gave me that same practiced smile. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, her voice light. Then, without waiting for a reply, she walked down the short hallway and disappeared into the bedroom. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat on the couch, heart racing faster than it should have. The night had escalated so quickly it didn't feel real. I picked up one of the magazines just to have something to do with my hands. Minutes passed. I heard faint movements from the bedroom, the muffled scrape of drawers opening, the low thud of a door closing again. I figured she was changing or freshening up. Normal enough. I leaned back, trying to settle my nerves. The apartment was too quiet. No TV, no music. Just the faint hum of an old refrigerator in the background. That's when the front door slammed open. The sound was so sudden, so violent, that I jumped to my feet before I even registered what was happening. A man stormed in, broad shoulders, red face, eyes burning. His voice exploded into the room, sharp and furious, demanding to know who the hell I was and what I was doing there. My mouth went dry. I stammered, trying to explain, but he cut me off, stepping forward with his fists balled tight. His eyes scanned the apartment like he was looking for proof of something, then locked back on me with raw rage. Panic seized me. I scrambled backward, hands raised in surrender, my back pressing into the wall. I told him I was with her. I pointed down the hallway toward the bedroom, desperate for her to come out and explain, to prove I wasn't some intruder. His expression twisted. His voice cracked as he shouted louder, veins bulging in his neck. He yelled that this was his apartment. His apartment. My stomach dropped. I glanced down the hallway, calling her name. My voice shook, almost breaking. Silence. The bedroom door stayed closed. No footsteps. No voice. Nothing. The man stepped closer, the air between us tightening. I could smell him, sweat, alcohol, and something sour. His chest heaved, his fists clenched, his eyes wild. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I was pinned by the weight of his fury. I tried again, stammering that she invited me, that she told me to make myself comfortable. His glare sharpened. He bellowed, his face twisting even more, veins standing out like ropes in his temples. He screamed that no one else lived here. The room tilted. The hallway remained dead silent. The door still shut. No movement, no explanation. It was like she'd never gone in there at all. The air in the room grew heavy, crushing, every breath harder than the last. My mind raced, piecing it together. She had brought me here, told me to sit down, vanished, and now was standing in a stranger's apartment with a man ready to break me in half. My eyes flicked toward the door. He noticed. His stance tightened, his glare daring me to try. Seconds dragged like hours. My palms slicked with sweat, my knees trembled. Then, without warning, he stepped back. Just one step. His face still twisted with rage, but his voice dropped lower, guttural. He pointed at the door, his finger shaking, and told me to get out. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag off the couch and shoved past him, the brush of his shoulder against mine hot, suffocating. My chest burned as I bolted into the hallway. The stairwell door slammed open under my hand, the metal clanging so loud it echoed through the building. I tore down the stairs, 2 at a time, my footsteps ricocheting in the narrow space. My breath came ragged, my pulse deafening in my ears. Every shadow stretched long, Every flickering bulb looked like a threat. When I hit the street, the night air smacked me in the face, sharp and cold. I didn't stop. I ran, my shoes pounding the pavement, my head jerking back every few seconds to make sure he wasn't behind me. Only when I was several blocks away did I slow, gasping, bent over with my hands on my knees. My phone slipped in my sweaty grip as I tried to call a friend. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I never saw her again. Her number was gone from my phone, erased somehow. Her profile on the app had vanished too, as if she never existed. But the apartment stayed burned into my mind. The couch tucked against the wall, the framed prints, the neat little stack of magazines on the table. And then him. The stranger's face twisted in rage, screaming that it was his. The hallway door stayed shut. She never came out. And the more I think about it, the less I believe she was ever really in there at all.